Hello class students of ICSE class 3. I'm back again and we are going to do another lesson from our Radiant Reader. Radiant Reader lesson number 3. This is the second part of the story of Dr. Abdul Kalam. Earlier on I had done lesson 2 in which I introduced Dr. Kalam to you. So this is a continuation of the same lesson, which is lesson number 3. It's on page 17 of your Radiant Reader, and you will open to your page 17 and I'll start with the lesson. In this lesson, they have just described Abdul Kalam in detail. Dr. Abdul Kalam has been described in detail in this lesson. And further on, they go to tell us that in 2002, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, he became the 11th President of India. He was the 11th President of India. He was a popular president who was well respected by all people of the country. During his term as president, he had another name. He was known as the People's President. So his second name during the term. So the first name, if you remember, he was known as the Missile Man. And the second name that he got for himself was because he was such a popular president, and so the people named him People's President. He was known as the People's President. Kalam was noted for his simple way of living. He never owned a television, and his personal possessions were just his books, his veena and some clothes, a CD player and a laptop. So this tells us that he was a very, very simple man. He did not have any personal possessions. He did not own a television. He did not own a television. The only personal possessions he had was his books, his veena. Veena is an instrument like the sitar. So he used to play the veena. So he had his veena, some clothes, a CD player and a laptop. After his presidentship and his tenure as a president of India, Dr. Kalam lectured at many academic and research institutions across India. He was a very good person, and he loved to stay with children, among students and kids. He felt that he could impart a lot of knowledge to these growing and budding children. And so he went from academic centers, from one center to the other, and he used to give many research institutions, he used to lecture them. He used to lecture research institutions and other academic institutions. A role model for the students and young people. He was a role model for students and young people. Dr. Kalam was always happy to be among them. He had a set of target of meetings and interacting with as many students as possible. So he set a target of meetings and interacting with as many students as possible. So he tried to interact with many students that he could as possible. His reason for this was that he once said, "I feel comfortable in the company of young people, particularly high school students. Henceforth, I intend to share with them my experiences, helping them to ignite their imagination and prepare them to work for a developed India." So his main aim was that he wanted to develop the young minds of the students, and he wanted to share his experiences with the students so that he could help them to ignite their imagination. Ignite, the word ignite. Ignite means to set on fire. The actual meaning of ignite, the ignite has two meanings, to set on fire. So the same word ignite over here means that he wanted to set their intellectual, academic knowledge, and their quest to ask questions, their query and quest to ask questions. He wanted to ignite that in them. He wanted to build the children in such a way that they would ask questions and they would just try to find the answers to those same very questions that they asked. So this was how he wanted to help the developing country of India, by helping young students. And particularly, if you remember, it was high students that he wanted to sit and talk with. Besides being an aerospace engineer, he was an aerospace engineer. Besides being an aerospace engineer, a rocket engineer, he was a technologist, a scientist, he was a teacher and a president of India. So besides being all this, he still went around giving lectures to students in various institutes. So you can imagine he had so many laurels to his name. The laurels that he had was, he was an aerospace engineer, a rocket engineer, a technologist, a scientist, and a teacher. Not to forget, he was a president of India. Dr. Kalam was a great author and poet. So here you can see he was also an author and a poet. He did author his own book, his autobiography. He wrote an autobiography about himself, and he penned a lot of poems. His poems are very famous. So he wrote a lot of poetry, and he also wrote books. Over here we come to know that he wrote many books and a number of poems. His words always inspired and motivated people of all age groups. So if you have read any of his books or read his poems, one gets motivated and inspired. To get motivated is to have a reason to do something. To have a reason to do something. So that is what is called motivation. When you have a reason to do something, means you are motivated. So his books inspired people and it gave people a reason to do something. This was not for only young children. People of all age groups admired him. Dr. Kalam was very active until his last day and the last moment of his life. He was a very active person. He used to roam around, even so much so that he was active till the last day and the last moment of his life. He was lecturing at IIM Shillong. So at IIM Shillong, he was giving a lecture when on July 27, 2015, when suddenly he collapsed and died at the age of 83. So imagine, children, at the age of 83, he was still teaching, and the last he was still standing at the age of 83 and teaching at IIM Shillong, and he was giving a lecture when suddenly he collapsed and he died. India and the world mourned the loss of this great and inspiring soul. His words were very famous. He once said that education and values imparted in childhood are more important than education in the colleges and university. So in short, to say that what you teach your children or what children learn during their childhood, the education and the values of life, what they learn during their childhood is much, much, much more important than what one learns in college and universities. That was what Dr. Kalam's words were. Dr. Kalam and will always inspire everyone to work hard. He was one person who always inspired everyone to work on. Although he is no more amongst us, people still look at him and they are inspired to keep on working and not to stop, whatever the age, whatever the factors, whatever the problems. People still continue in his footsteps. Dr. Kalam had a will inspired everyone to work hard to achieve their dreams and make India a developed country. So he had and will. Dr. Kalam had and will always inspire everyone to continue their dreams, to dream and to achieve your dreams. You just don't dream about certain things. When you dream, you make sure that you try to achieve what you have dreamt of. So to make things come true. This is your lesson for today. We have meanings that I will go through with you. Possession is the state of having something. When you possess something, it's a state of when you have something. Like you have a pen, so that is your possession. You have a pen. So possession is a state of having something. Veena is a musical instrument. Interact. Interact is when you interact with people. You interact with your teachers, you interact with your parents, you interact with your friends. That means you talk to your teachers, you ask questions, you talk to your parents, ask questions, and vice versa. So that is called interacting. When two people are talking to each other and they're asking each other questions and also normal talking, just asking information, gaining knowledge, that is called interacting. Imagination. Imagination is when you are forming new ideas. You imagine different things, and when you are imagining, you form different ideas. You start building up different ideas in your mind. Technologist. A technologist is a person who uses scientific knowledge. A technologist is a person who uses scientific knowledge to solve problems. When you use scientific knowledge to solve problems, you are called a technologist. Okay? So people who believe in science, they use scientific methods to solve their problems. Inspire. Inspire is to motivate and to encourage someone. When you want to inspire someone, you do something so that when a person sees you doing that thing, particular thing, you get motivated and you get inspired. Suddenly fall down. Collapse. When you say collapse, means to suddenly fall down. The meaning of collapse means to suddenly fall down. The building collapsed. The building collapsed in an earthquake. So suddenly the building fell down to the ground during an earthquake. So that is the meaning of collapse, to suddenly fall down. Another meaning to collapse is also to faint. When you are feeling giddy and you're not feeling well, you faint. And when you faint, you fall down, you collapse. Mourn. Mourn is you start feeling sad when someone has died. At the death of someone, when you hear of someone's death, you feel sad and you mourn. You feel sad and you mourn. So feeling sad for the death of someone is called mourning. Impart. Make known. When you impart something, when you give someone something, some good words of wisdom, that is you're imparting knowledge. You're making known some good words of wisdom to someone. You're telling someone something which they did not know about. That can be a part of impart. It's not necessary that you have to impart knowledge. You can impart with a lot of things. You can impart with your best cycle, your cycle which is your best cycle. You can impart, you can give, you can make it known that you can use my cycle. You can make it known to your friend that my cycle is available to you whenever you want. So that is impart. Let's move on to the exercise, and your first question, I'm going to read the question out and just discuss the answer. So please pay attention so that when you have to write the answer, you can write it without any doubt. Why was Dr. Kalam called the People's President? Why was he called the People's President? He was called the People's President because he was popular and well respected among all people. He was called the People's President because he was popular and well respected among all people. How did Dr. Kalam spend his time after his presidentship was over? Now, when he was a president, he did not have time to do the things he loved. So, after his presidentship, Dr. Kalam lectured at academic and research institutions, and he went and he visited children who were in the high school, and he lectured them and he gave them, imparted his knowledge to them. You have to write about, the next question says to write about the qualities of Dr. Kalam. So, there are many qualities that Dr. Kalam had. One, let's start with the very beginning, the very simple ones. So, he was a very simple person in life. In real life, Dr. Kalam was an absolute simple person. He did not own any possessions. He did not own a lot of things. He owned very few things. Basically, he just had enough of clothes, and he had his veena, he had a CD player and a laptop. That was all that he owned. And he did not even own a television. So this tells us that simplicity was one of the factors, one of his qualities. So simplicity of life was one of his qualities. He was a kind man. He was kind in nature, and he always was willing to help others. Another one is intelligence. Intelligence, we get to know about intelligence because he was an aerospace engineer, he was a technological engineer, he was a scientist, a rocket engineer, a teacher, and then finally he was also the President of India. So this obviously tells us that he was an intelligent person. So simplicity, kindness, intelligence. And then the last but not the least, he was an inspiring person. Inspiring person means he used to inspire younger generation of children. So he used to inspire them by parting with knowledge. Parting of knowledge and giving them knowledge, giving them ideas, showing them how to better themselves. So this was what he used to do. He used to inspire people. He used to inspire people never to give up and always to do what one wanted to do. However the difficulties, whatever the difficulties may be, face your difficulties and complete what you want to do. When you are planning to do something, children, remember, when you plan to do something, when you plan to do something, you cannot do that easily. Nothing comes easily. You always have to work hard. You have to work hard. Sometimes there are good times, sometimes there are bad times. If you're making a project, sometimes you stick it and it stands. Sometimes you go on sticking your project and you're building, whatever you're building, you go on sticking it with Fevikwik and it doesn't stand and it falls. And you keep, you do it once, you do it twice. Then you get very irritated that I'm doing so much and it is not sticking. But that is a way for God. God tells you, He is teaching you. He is not angry with you and He is not making life difficult. He is teaching you how to make variations, how to do it in a proper way, so that you will always remember the mistakes you have made. If we make mistakes in life, then we get to learn certain things. We remember them. If you make practical mistakes, you remember them. And then the next time you will not repeat that same mistake. That same mistake will not be repeated. So this is what it is. He was an inspiring person. He used to inspire children, and not only small children but people of all ages. So this is what his personality and what the question is. All his different qualities. So the different qualities, again I will repeat it to you, the different qualities that Dr. Abdul Kalam had was simplicity, kindness, intelligence, and he was also a very inspiring person. What was Dr. Kalam doing on the day of his death? On the day of his death, Dr. Kalam was lecturing at IIM Shillong, and he collapsed while lecturing during his lecture. So this is your answer. Dr. Kalam was lecturing at IIM Shillong and he collapsed during his lecture and died a sudden death at the age of 83. Question number 2 is saying something to write about. Write about various great things done by Dr. Kalam for our country. So in your previous lesson, if you remember, he first built a helicopter for the Indian Army. This is one thing, great thing that he did for our country. He built the helicopter. The first helicopter was designed by Dr. Abdul Kalam, and also in your previous lesson, he was the first one to go ahead and help in the research and technology of building of the spaceship, which was called the satellite launch vehicle. This was called the satellite launch vehicle, and he was the project director of India's first satellite launch vehicle. So he was the first one to make a helicopter. He was the first director of India's satellite launch vehicle. He also developed missiles. He was the first to develop missiles, which was the first missiles that he developed was called Agni and Ch-3. And also his other various things that he did in his life was that he lectured. He was an aerospace engineer, a rocket engineer, a technologist, a scientist, a teacher, and a president. He lectured in all institutes and also in various fields of science. In various fields of science, he lectured, and he never gave up till the day he died. He kept on lecturing in academic and in research institutes. So he went to academic institutes and research institutes and he lectured. That was one thing. Then there is another very great thing about him, and the other one is that he was an author and a poet. That is the last one. He was an author and a great poet. So these were the great various things that were done by Dr. Kalam. So first of all, let's do a recap. He built a helicopter for the Indian Army. He was the director of the Indian space launching system, which was called the space launching of the launch vehicle. It was the first satellite launching vehicle, which was called SLV. And he also was the man who made the missile for the first time, which was called Agni and Ch-3, and he was known as the missile man. Then later on, he was a teacher, an engineer, a rocket engineer, an aerospace engineer, a technologist. He was a scientist, a teacher, and last but not the least, he was a president. He also wrote books. He was an author and also a poet, because he authored books and he wrote poems. So this is his achievements. Certain words are given down below in question 3. Certain words are given in list A, and you have to match these words which are opposites to list B. Now these are opposite words. Opposite words means they are words of two different feelings. If one is happy, then the opposite of happy is sad. So there you get the opposite. So it is directly the opposite to the other word. So if you have against, So against, if you are against something, then you are for something. If you are against copying, then you are for studying. Okay, you're all for studying. So against and for. Then you have enemies. Enemies, you have enemies, and the opposite of enemies are friends. You have friends. So you have enemies and you have friends. Enemies and friends. Learning. Learning, the opposite of learning is teaching. When you're learning, you are teaching someone. When someone is teaching you, you are learning. So it works both ways. You never do something, and there are certain things that you always do. So never, the opposite of never is always. You never go to sleep late in the night, but you always get up early in the morning. So never and always. Inside and outside. You are inside the house in the evenings, and you are outside the house in the morning. Outside the house in the mornings because you go to school, and you are inside the house in the evenings because it's time for you to do your studies and to eat your dinner and go to bed. So inside, and the opposite of inside is outside. Unhappy and happy. So now children, for your work, you have to write 10 opposite words. 10 opposite words with their answers. 10 words with their answers in the opposites. You have to do question 3 by writing 10 words of your own. We have something to think about. Dr. APJ Kalam once said, give 1 hour a day for book reading, and in a few years you will become a knowledge center. So this is a very simple statement that Dr. Kalam said. He says that if you read every day for 1 hour, you read anything at all for 1 hour every day, that reading every day of 1 hour will increase your knowledge so much, and there will be so much of information stored in your brains that you will know the answer to every solution. You will know the answer to every problem, or you will know the answer to anything asked when you keep reading. So in short, children, make sure that you read every day. The more you read, the more knowledge you gain. You can do reading since you're a small child, or even till you're old. Knowledge never dies. You always get to learn something new. Every time there is some new invention, or there's some new information in the world, and when you read about it, you get to know more about it. So reading is the one thing that gives you knowledge. What do you understand by this? Write a few lines. Will you like to become a knowledge center? So, what did you understand by this sentence? Give 1 hour a day for book reading, and in a few years you will become a knowledge center. So, I just explained that one line to you. You have to write a few lines and answer the question saying whether you would like to become a center of knowledge, or whether you are not interested in becoming a center of knowledge. So my children, this is your lesson about Dr. Abdul Kalam. We had done it earlier in lesson 2 and lesson 3. So here we go, and this lessons you have to please write the question answers that are there in the exercise in your notebook for your work. This work of yours that you write will be checked when school reopens, and based on this work that you have written, you will get your marks.